This nation, which is frequently dismissed as one of the poorest in Africa, is taking charge of its financial future and managing it independently. However, how? Let's investigate. The world came to a halt in 2024 when Burkina Faso's Prime Minister, Dr. Apollinaire Kiame Tambela, stated that the country's $4.79 billion in domestic debt would be repaid. No World Bank loans, no IMF rescue, and no giveaways from Western countries. They rejected the myth that the poorest countries in Africa will always have to rely on loans and aid from outside sources. Rather, they looked to their markets and people. Burkina Faso changed the narrative in an area that is frequently characterized by its reliance on financial assistance from the West. However, how did this tiny landlocked nation, often dismissed as a financial mess, manage to accomplish such a remarkable achievement? How did Burkina Faso manage a precarious political and security environment while paying off over $5 billion in debt? A series of well-thought-out, strategic actions that transformed domestic debt into an economic lifeline hold the key to the solution. A fundamental change in Burkina Faso's financial method was the first crucial tactic that enabled it to settle its debt. Burkina Faso went home rather than depending on aid from Western organizations or loans from abroad. Local investors, companies, banks, and citizens who had been becoming more optimistic about the nation's leadership and economic future were given bonds by the government. It may initially appear contradictory for a nation dealing with economic difficulties, such as security concerns from insurgent organizations. However, Burkina Faso's leadership saw that an evolving financial infrastructure and a growing feeling of national pride and solidarity offered the ideal environment for accessing local markets. Burkina Faso established a mechanism for local investors to directly finance the nation's debt repayment. The foundation of this tactic was trust. The leadership of Burkina Faso fostered faith in their capacity. Local investors were more inclined to lend to their country as a result of the government's encouragement of fiscal restraint and a dedication to infrastructure development. Instead of relying on foreign markets or international institutions, Burkina Faso now relied on its citizens' financial power. This action contributed to the country's mentality, changing from one that relied on foreign assistance. The outcomes were astounding. Investor confidence skyrocketed, and Burkina Faso was able to access local capital, an untapped domestic resource. Burkina Faso demonstrated that local debt may be a potent instrument for self-sufficiency. By concentrating on this tactic, discussions like the one we're having now are crucial because of this. The mindset of our direct supervision must be abandoned in order to establish a shared sense of governance. The government's ability to preserve investor trust in the face of Burkina Faso's unstable political and security landscape was among the most remarkable features of the country's debt repayment plan. The nation had been under a lot of stress due to the Sahelian conflict and the threat of terrorism. However, Burkina Faso's leadership skillfully handled these difficulties, preserving a sound financial climate that enabled them to keep issuing bonds and generating money at home. Burkina Faso achieved the exact opposite in a nation where economic flight is frequently caused by instability. One important element that the West had overlooked was the strength of African self-determination. The leadership of Burkina Faso demonstrated that African countries are capable of managing their finances independently of outside influences and making their own decisions. They proved that Africa does not have to rely on financial institutions or Western nations to survive.